The Billionaire's Fake Fiancée, a homeless girl's journey into the world of wealth. Proposal. Evelyn Parker's world had always been one of cold concrete and relentless struggle. The streets of New York City were her home. At least that's what it felt like. For as long as she could remember, she had lived from hand to mouth, scraping by with odd jobs and the kindness of strangers, always one step away from disaster. The days were long and exhausting, and the nights spent curled up in the corner of some alley, trying to escape the biting chill of the winter air. But even in the darkest of times, Evelyn had never lost the spark in her eyes. The spark of hope that one day things would change, that one day she'd be able to break free from this life. But what she hadn't expected was for that day to come in the form of a strange encounter at a high-end cafe downtown. It was a late afternoon, the sky a deep purple as the sun began to set. Evelyn had just finished working an overnight shift at a local diner, and the exhaustion weighed on her shoulders as she stepped into the cafe to grab us coffee. She had no intention of staying long. The warmth of the shop and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee were all she needed to gather her thoughts before heading back to the streets. It wasn't long before a man caught her attention. He was sitting at a table near the window, a sleek black suit fitting perfectly over his tall, broad frame. He looked out of place in the cozy cafe, his presence commanding the room. His name was Lucas Westbrook, a billionaire businessman known for his icy demeanor and his work in the tech industry. She had seen his face on the covers of magazines, his wealth and status making headlines almost every week. He was the kind of man who seemed untouchable, the kind of man people like her could only dream of. But dreams had a funny way of turning into reality. Evelyn had no intention of catching his eye. She wasn't the type to draw attention, especially in a place like this, but Lucas, it seemed, had other plans. His gaze met hers, and for a brief moment it felt like time stopped. The world around her blurred, and all she could focus on were his piercing blue eyes. There was something in his gaze, something that made her heart race for reasons she couldn't explain. But before she could turn away, he stood up and walked over to her. "Excuse me," he said in a voice that was smooth like silk. "I couldn't help but notice you sitting there. Would you mind joining me for a moment?" Evelyn blinked, taken aback by the sudden attention. She glanced around, wondering if he was speaking to someone else. But no, he was looking directly at her. "Me?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. She was a little confused. Was he mistaken? He couldn't possibly be talking to her, a girl who had nothing to her name. "Yes, you." Lucas smiled, his lips curling into a hint of amusement. "Please, just for a moment, I'm in need of your help with something." So Evelyn hesitated, her instincts telling her to walk away, to keep her distance. But something about the way he spoke, his calm, assured tone, intrigued her. No. She was no stranger to the hardships of life. But this was different. All right, she said, her voice cautious but curious. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit." As she made her way to the table, Evelyn couldn't help but notice the contrast between their lives. His suit, so perfectly tailored, gleamed under the soft cafe lights. Meanwhile, she was wearing the same worn-out clothes she'd had for weeks. A bag slung over her shoulder was her only possession, a reminder of her never-ending struggle. But Lucas didn't seem to mind. "So, what is it that you need help with?" she asked, sitting down but still keeping a respectful distance. Lucas leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing with focus. "I need you to do something for me. Something simple but important. I need you to pretend to be my fiancé." Evelyn stared at him, blinking in disbelief. "Your fiancé?" "Yes. You see, my mother, well, she's very eager for me to settle down. She's been pushing me to find someone, and she's very determined. So I need a woman to play the part for a few weeks. In return, I'll pay you generously. You won't have to do anything else, just act like we're in love for her sake." Evelyn's mind raced as she processed his words. Was he serious? He wanted her to pretend to be his fiancé just for a few weeks. It seemed absurd, but the more she thought about it, the more appealing it sounded. Money, stability, a chance to step out of the shadows of the streets, even if it was for a short time. "And why me?" she asked then, still trying to make sense of it all. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, as if studying her. "There's something about you," he said quietly. "You're different. You stand out even in a place like this. You've got a presence, Evelyn. I think you'd be perfect for the role." Evelyn's heart raced. She had no idea what he saw in her, but for the first time in a long time she felt seen. "Think about it," Lucas continued, his voice smooth and persuasive. "A few weeks, a little acting, and I'll give you everything you need. Money, a place to stay, anything. It'll be easy." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. A place to stay. No more cold nights on the streets. No more struggling to get by, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. But was it worth it? Was she ready to step into a world that wasn't hers? Before she could respond, Lucas added, "You can leave whenever you want." "Of course, there's no obligation, but I think this could work for both of us." Evelyn sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had never been one to trust easily, but something about Lucas's offer intrigued her. It was a chance to escape her reality, even if it was just for a little while, and who knew what could happen? Maybe she'd even make a name for herself in a world she had never dared to dream of. Finally, she spoke. "All right," she said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "I'll do it." Stepping into the unknown, Evelyn had always prided herself on being a survivor. She'd lived through hardships most people could never imagine each day, a battle against the world that seemed determined to knock her down. But as she stepped into the luxurious apartment building where Lucas had asked her to meet him the next day, she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. This was no longer the gritty, familiar world she knew. It was a world of polished marble floors, golden accents, and the kind of wealth that made her feel like a stranger. Lucas had arranged for her to meet him at his penthouse, a space that seemed almost too grand to be real. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a hallway lined with expensive artwork. The walls were adorned with paintings from renowned artists, their vibrant colors almost mocking the dull reality of Evelyn's life. She couldn't help but wonder what this life would feel like, a life of luxury, of comfort, of freedom from worry. The doors opened, and there he was again, Lucas Westbrook, standing in front of her, looking every bit the part of the polished billionaire. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, his dark hair neatly combed, and his striking blue eyes focused intently on her. There was an air of confidence about him, as if he owned not just the apartment, but the entire city. "Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth as ever, "I'm glad you came. I know this might be overwhelming, but you'll get used to it." She stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The apartment was nothing short of spectacular. Large windows stretched across the walls, offering a breathtaking view of the city below. Expensive furniture, plush rugs, and gleaming chandeliers filled the space, and Evelyn felt completely out of place. "Do you want something to drink?" Lucas asked, guiding her toward a grand sitting area. His voice was casual, as though this was all perfectly normal for him. "No, thank you," Evelyn replied, her voice quiet as she tried to steady her nerves. "Suit yourself," Lucas said, sitting down on a velvet couch, patting the seat next to him. "You'll need to get used to this. Being in the public eye isn't easy, but I think you're more than capable of handling it." Evelyn sat down hesitantly, unsure of what to say next. She had agreed to the role, to pretend to be his fiancée for a few weeks. But now that she was here, the reality of the situation was beginning to set in. She couldn't help but feel like she was walking a tightrope, one wrong move away from falling off into a world she didn't understand. "So what's the plan?" she asked, her voice betraying her unease. "What exactly do I have to do?" Lucas looked at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's simple, really. We'll attend some events together, meet my friends and colleagues, and act like we're madly in love. My mother wants to see us together, and after that, we'll go our separate ways. You'll get everything you need. Money, a place to stay, whatever. All I ask is that you make it convincing." Evelyn nodded, still processing his words. The thought of playing the role of his fiancée, a woman who was everything she was, not felt strange, but the promise of security, of a life without worry, tugged at her. "I can do that," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "But what happens after, when the charade is over?" Lucas leaned back in his seat, his gaze never leaving hers. "That's entirely up to you. I'm not asking for anything from you beyond your acting skills. You'll get paid well, and you can move on with your life when it's done. There's no commitment on your part, just a little time and a little effort. That's all." His words were reassuring, but Evelyn still felt a nagging sense of doubt. Was this really just a simple arrangement, or was she stepping into something much more complicated than she could handle? She tried to shake off the feeling, focusing on the opportunity ahead of her. "I'll do it," she said again, her voice steady, though her heart was still racing. The next few days passed in a blur of events, high-end restaurants and fancy parties. Evelyn found herself surrounded by people whose lives were worlds apart from her own. She was the outsider in a sea of wealth and sophistication, trying desperately to fit in, to look the part of the high society woman Lucas wanted her to be. At every event, she played her role perfectly. She laughed at the right times, gazed at Lucas with affection, and wore the beautiful dresses he'd bought for her with grace. But inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was just pretending. The woman in the mirror wasn't her. She wasn't this polished, elegant fiancée. She was still the girl from the streets, still haunted by the past that she couldn't escape. But there were moments, small moments, when the act began to feel real. When Lucas would glance at her across the room, his eyes softening, or when he would place his hand on the small of her back in a protective gesture that made her heart flutter. These moments confused her, made her question her role in this carefully constructed game they were playing. One evening, as they walked out of a gala, Lucas turned to her with a serious expression. "You're doing great," he said. "But I need you to know something. This isn't just for show. My mother, she's very persuasive. She'll be looking for signs of real affection between us, and I won't let you fail." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "You don't have to worry about me," she said, her voice tight. "I'll play my part. I'll make it convincing." But as they drove back to his penthouse that night, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder, was this all really just a game, or was she slowly losing herself in the role she was playing? The mask slips. Evelyn's days with Lucas began to blur into a whirlwind of events and meetings, each more extravagant than the last. At first she had been uncomfortable playing a role she wasn't sure she was suited for. But as the days went by, she started to fall into the rhythm of it. She smiled on cue, laughed at the right moments, and became the perfect fiancée in front of the cameras, the guests, and Lucas's high society friends. She knew her lines well, and she delivered them with ease, like a trained actress playing the part of a woman far above her station, yet each time she looked in the mirror, she could still see the girl she had been. The girl who had slept on park benches and scavenged for food in the trash bins. The contrast between her old life and the life she was now pretending to have was enough to make her stomach churn. Was she just a pawn in this elaborate game, or was there more at stake than she realized? It wasn't until the day they attended one of Lucas's family gatherings that Evelyn's doubts started to crystallize into something much deeper, something far more personal. The grand estate was tucked away in a secluded area surrounded by lush gardens and an imposing iron gate that seemed to be guarding the secrets of the family. Inside, Evelyn sat in the back of the sleek black car, her palms damp, heart racing as the estate came into view. Lucas had assured her that this would be just another dinner, another part of the charade, but something in the way he had looked at her when he mentioned his mother made her uneasy. There was something more to this. "I'm sure it'll be fine," Lucas said, sensing her nervousness as they approached the mansion. "Just stick with me. Act natural. You've done this before, remember?" Evelyn gave him a tight smile, trying to mask her growing unease. Right, act natural. When the car stopped, Lucas was the first to get out, offering his hand to her. As she stepped out, she couldn't help but feel small in this world of excess. The house loomed above her, a mansion with tall columns and walls of glass that glittered like diamonds. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses floated through the air from the garden, guests mingled in their finest clothes, their polished shoes clicking on the marble floors. Inside, Evelyn had only ever been to a few parties in her life, and they had been nothing like this. She felt like an imposter, a beggar at the feast. But as Lucas led her inside, she straightened her back, took a deep breath, and forced herself to smile. She was here for a reason, and that reason had nothing to do with her past. She was here for the future. Lucas led her to a group of people who greeted them warmly. Evelyn smiled, nodding as Lucas introduced her as his fiancée. She played her part perfectly, laughing at the right moments, making small talk, but always staying a little detached. She couldn't bring herself to feel connected to any of these people. They were all so different, so far removed from her reality. It wasn't until they sat down to dinner that Evelyn began to feel the weight of the night. Lucas's mother, Grace, had been eyeing her all evening. Evelyn caught the woman's gaze several times, the sharpness in her eyes sending a chill down her spine. She had been polite, even cordial, but there was an underlying current of scrutiny in everything Grace did. The way she looked at Evelyn, the way she asked questions, it was as if she was trying to peel back the layers of the facade Evelyn had so carefully crafted. Evelyn was in the middle of a conversation with one of Lucas's colleagues when she felt it. A hand on her arm, a soft but insistent pressure. She turned to find Grace standing beside her, her expression unreadable. "Evelyn," Grace said, her voice sweet but firm. "Would you mind coming with me for a moment?" Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't part of the plan, but she forced a smile and nodded, excusing herself from the conversation. Grace led her to a quieter part of the house where the sound of the dinner party faded into the background. The room was adorned with expensive antiques, every piece carefully chosen to reflect the family's wealth and status. Once they were alone, Grace turned to face her, her expression softening but still carrying an intensity that made Evelyn's skin prickle. "I've been watching you," Grace said quietly, her voice low, but unmistakable. You've done well so far. Played the role of the perfect fiancé. But I need to know something." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She knew what was coming, but she didn't know how to respond. What do you mean? She asked, trying to sound casual, though her mind raced. Grace looked at her with piercing eyes, studying her every movement. I know my son, Evelyn. I know when he's truly happy, and I know when he's faking it. I've been watching the way he looks at you. It's different from the others. I need to know, are you really the woman he's in love with? Or is this all just part of your arrangement? Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? That she had no idea what was real anymore. That she was only here to pretend that she had started to care for Lucas even if she didn't fully understand why. Instead, she simply smiled, her lips tight. I'm here for Lucas. I'm here because I care about him. That's all that matters, right? Grace's gaze softened slightly, but Evelyn saw the doubt still flickering in her eyes. She stepped back, nodding slowly. Very well. But remember, Evelyn, nothing is as easy as it seems. You're playing a dangerous game. And I don't think you fully understand the stakes. As they returned to the dinner table, Evelyn's mind was reeling. She had known this would be hard, but this felt different. It felt personal. Lucas's mother had made it clear that she wasn't fooled by the act, and that only made Evelyn question everything. Was she just another pawn in their game, a tool to help Lucas gain his inheritance, or was there something more to this strange arrangement? The night continued, but Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. That the lines between reality and the act were beginning to blur, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences. The unraveling of lies. Evelyn stood by the window, her eyes gazing out into the sprawling gardens of the Duroff estate. But her mind was 1,000 miles away. She couldn't shake the words Grace had spoken to her earlier, each one echoing in her head like a persistent drumbeat. You're playing a dangerous game. What had started as a simple act pretending to be Lucas's fiancée for a few weeks was quickly becoming something much more complex. At first it had been easy. She had played the role of the polished, wealthy fiancé, always smiling, always saying the right things. But as the days passed, the lines between her real self and the character she was portraying began to blur, and now she wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. Lucas's mother had seen through her act, and that was something Evelyn hadn't expected. She had assumed that, like everyone else, Grace would buy into the story. But Grace's sharp eyes had seen the cracks in her performance, the way she hesitated, the way she couldn't seem to fully integrate into their world. But what scared Evelyn more than Grace's scrutiny was the way Lucas had looked at her. For the first time, she wasn't sure if his feelings for her were just part of the act too. Was he falling for her because she was playing the part of his fiancée so well? Or had something real begun to stir between them? The truth was, Evelyn didn't know what to feel anymore. She didn't know if she was pretending to be in love with Lucas or if in some twisted way she was actually starting to care for him. The kiss they shared the other night, the one that had been laced with too much emotion, had thrown everything into chaos. But one thing was certain, the comfortable illusion she had created was beginning to crack, and the last thing Evelyn wanted was to get caught in a web of lies that she couldn't escape from. The next morning, after a restless night, Evelyn decided that she needed to take control of the situation. She couldn't live in this uncertain limbo any longer. She couldn't keep pretending if she was going to be involved in this world. She needed to know where she stood, and more importantly, whether or not Lucas's feelings were genuine. Lucas had invited her to another family gathering, this time at a private country club. It was supposed to be casual, a small affair to introduce her to some of his business partners, but Evelyn had a feeling that this wasn't just any ordinary event. There were too many people involved, too many stakes at play, and she needed to find out what role she truly played in Lucas's life. She arrived at the country club earlier than expected, hoping to have a moment alone with Lucas before the event began. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. She stood by the entrance waiting for him to arrive, her thoughts swirling. When he finally appeared, dressed in a sharp suit, his hairstyle just so, he looked every bit the part of the confident, wealthy heir, but there was something in his eyes as he approached her, something that made Evelyn's heart beat a little faster. She didn't know if it was excitement or fear, but she knew she couldn't ignore it. Evelyn, Lucas said, his voice warm as he walked up to her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to lean into his touch, trying to push aside the uncertainty that plagued her. Are you okay? He asked, his brow furrowing with concern. You seem a little distant. Evelyn hesitated before answering, her heart racing. She had to ask him, had to make sure that she wasn't just a pawn in his game. She didn't want to be just another one of his distractions. A placeholder for something else he wanted. She needed to know if he cared for her as more than a mere act. I'm fine, she said softly, her voice betraying none of the turmoil inside her. But Lucas, I need to ask you something. He looked at her, his expression shifting as though sensing the seriousness of her tone. Of course, what's on your mind? Evelyn took a deep breath, steeling herself. She couldn't be afraid of the truth anymore. Do you see this as just a game? She asked, her voice low, almost trembling. I mean, do you really see me as someone who could be in your life? Or am I just part of the plan? Lucas's eyes darkened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before it was replaced by something unreadable. For a moment he didn't speak, just stood there, his hand still resting on her shoulder as though he were searching for the right words. I don't know what you mean, he said finally, his voice strained. This is real, Evelyn. You're real to me. All of this, he waved a hand toward the opulent country club and the people milling about. It's just the world I live in. It's not who I am. You're the one I want, not all of this. Evelyn blinked, her heart skipping a beat. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the words coming out of his mouth were sincere, but a small part of her still couldn't shake the doubt. Could he really be telling the truth? Or was he just trying to keep her in the game a little longer? Before she could respond, someone called out to Lucas from across the room. A man in a dark suit approached, smiling broadly as he extended a hand. Lucas nodded toward him and turned to Evelyn. We'll talk more later, he said quickly, his voice softer now. I promise. Evelyn forced a smile and nodded, trying to push down the knot in her stomach. She watched as Lucas walked off to join his business partner, but her mind was still reeling. She had to know more. She had to figure out what he truly felt. Later that evening, after the event had ended, Evelyn found herself alone in the quiet of the hotel room she'd been assigned for the night. The soft hum of the city outside the window did little to calm her. Her phone buzzed and buzzed, and she glanced at the screen, her heart dropping when she saw that it was a message from Lucas. I know things are complicated. Let's talk tomorrow. I promise you won't regret giving us a chance. She stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what to feel. Was she ready to take that leap? Was she ready to trust him, even when everything in her past had taught her to keep her guard up? As she lay back on the bed, the cool sheets against her skin, she realized that she wasn't just playing a role anymore. This wasn't just about pretending for a few weeks. She had crossed a line. She had allowed herself to care for someone who had the power to destroy her, someone who might not even be the man he seemed to be. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the uncertainty wash over her. Tomorrow would come soon enough, but for now all she could do was hold on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find something real in the midst of all the lies. The price of truth. The morning came too quickly, and Evelyn found herself staring out the window again, her mind racing with the thoughts of last night. The promise of a real talk from Lucas sat heavy on her chest. She had spent hours tossing and turning, struggling with the whirlwind of emotions that had been growing between them. How could she trust him after everything? She had spent so much of her life fighting to stay afloat, never depending on anyone else. But Lucas, he had become a fixture in her life when she wasn't sure she could easily shake off. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the messages from Lucas. His words, while comforting, didn't feel entirely genuine. Every part of her wanted to believe him, to trust that his feelings for her were real, but there was a nagging feeling that wouldn't go away. Could it be possible that deep down he had feelings for her, or was she simply a tool to get him out of the situation he had created? The truth was, Evelyn wasn't sure if she could handle any more lies. She had grown used to keeping things bottled up, avoiding the harsh realities of life. But here now, with Lucas's world crashing into hers, she had to face something she had never allowed herself to. Emotions, real emotions. As she stared at the text one last time, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Lucas. She hesitated for only a moment before accepting the call, her heart pounding in her chest. Hey, Lucas said, his voice warm, almost hesitant. I was thinking we could meet for lunch. There's a cafe near the park. I'll be waiting for you there. We need to talk. Not the words echoed in her mind. We need to talk. What did that mean? Was he going to confess everything? Was this the moment when everything between them would change? Evelyn's hands tightened around the phone as she took a deep breath. I'll be there, she said, her voice betraying none of the anxiety she felt. See you soon. The cafe was quiet when Evelyn arrived, a stark contrast to the buzzing streets outside. Lucas was already there, sitting by a window, looking as if he had been waiting for hours, though it had only been a few minutes. His eyes lit up when he saw her. But she could also see the tension in his posture, the way his hands rested on the table. Fingers tapping nervously, Evelyn took a seat across from him, her eyes studying his face. He looked different today. less polished, more vulnerable. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before. Maybe it was because he knew the walls around her were beginning to crumble, and now it was his turn to bare his soul. "I know this isn't how you imagined things would go," Lucas began, his voice low. "I've been trying to get it right, but I've made a mess of things." Evelyn's stomach churned. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing him admit it out loud made everything feel too real. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, not sure what to say. "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Why did you lie to your mother, to everyone, and why drag me into this?" Lucas exhaled deeply, his gaze dropping to his hands before looking up at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "At first, it was just about getting my mother off my back. She's been on me for so long, pressuring me about getting married, finding someone suitable for the family. I thought if I could just pretend for a little while." He stopped, as if the words were suddenly too much to continue. Evelyn watched him, the betrayal she felt coming to the surface, but she held it back. He was just trying to solve his problem, she thought. But at what cost? "But why me?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "You didn't even know me, I was just a stranger. Why ask me to play this part?" He looked at her, his eyes softening. "I saw you, Evelyn. I don't know what it was, but there was something about you, something different. You weren't like the women I'm used to. You didn't try to impress me, and that made me see you in a way I didn't expect. I didn't know how to explain it. But after we started this, I realized I didn't want it to end." Evelyn froze, the air between them thickening as the weight of his words settled over her. Could it be true? Was Lucas actually starting to see her as more than just a game, more than just someone to pretend with? She shook her head, trying to process everything. "Lucas, this is crazy. You can't just ask me to pretend to be someone I'm not and expect everything to be fine. You're asking me to live in your world for a few weeks, and now you want me to believe that it's real." Lucas's hand reached across the table, hesitating before gently resting over hers. "I know this doesn't make sense, but I never expected to feel this way. I never planned for any of this to happen. But Evelyn, these feelings, they're real. I can't ignore them anymore. I don't want to lose you." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She wanted to pull away to protect herself from the feelings he was stirring in her, but a small part of her didn't want to let go either. She had been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day without being hurt, that she hadn't stopped to consider what it would feel like to let someone in. Evelyn met his gaze, her heart racing, as she finally spoke the words that had been on the tip of her tongue all along. "What if I don't believe you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What if I can't trust you?" The words hung in the air, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. It was as if the entire cafe had fallen silent, and it was just the two of them standing on the precipice of something unknown, a relationship built on lies. Yes, but also something that might be real finally. Lucas spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't undo the past, Evelyn. I can't change what I did. But I can promise you this, if you give me a chance, I'll show you that I'm not like the man you think I am. I'll prove it to you." Evelyn swallowed hard, her mind swirling with confusion and fear. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to fall for him. She wasn't supposed to feel this vulnerable, but as she looked into his eyes, she felt a small spark of hope, an ember that refused to be extinguished. "I don't know, Lucas," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I'm willing to try." For the first time since this whole charade began, Evelyn allowed herself to believe just for a moment that maybe, just maybe, there was something more to their story than just a lie. The storms before the calm, the days that followed, were a whirlwind for both Evelyn and Lucas. While Evelyn tried to immerse herself in the luxury of the world she had never known, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. She had told herself that this was just a temporary arrangement, that she would survive and walk away with her dignity intact. But as Lucas's smile grew more familiar, his touch lingered longer than expected. Evelyn began questioning if there was more to this than just a simple contract. Evelyn stood by the window of the penthouse, looking out at the vast city below. The nightlights twinkled like a sea of stars. But there was a deep emptiness in her chest. She had left behind the cold streets where she had learned to fend for herself, and now she was surrounded by wealth beyond imagination. Yet the void she felt seemed to grow bigger with each passing day. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she glanced at it to see a message from Lucas. "I'm coming over tonight. We need to talk. It's important, Evelyn sighed, her mind already racing with possibilities. The uncertainty between them had been palpable for days. Every time Lucas was around, she felt her heart flutter, and every time he left, she felt her walls go up. She had allowed herself to feel things for him that she hadn't felt in years, and now she wasn't sure if she could stop it. Just then, she heard the doorbell. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this the moment when everything would change? Would Lucas finally admit that his feelings for her were more than just part of their arrangement? She opened the door to find Lucas standing there, his usual confident smile replaced with an unusual tension. His eyes were clouded, his jaw tight. "Hey," Evelyn said, trying to sound casual, though her pulse was racing. "You look serious. What's going on?" Lucas stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't seem to notice the pristine elegance of the apartment, his focus entirely on her. "Evelyn, there's something we need to address." His voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge that made her stomach twist. Evelyn's breath caught. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she was ready for it. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I can do this anymore," Lucas said, his gaze not meeting hers. "The whole act, I mean." Evelyn's heart dropped. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "You know, pretending," he said, his voice low. "Pretending that we're something we're not. I can't keep lying to my family, and I can't keep lying to you." Evelyn blinked in surprise. This wasn't what she had expected. For a moment, she stood frozen, unsure of what to say. She had built up her walls so carefully, telling herself that nothing would come of this, but now Lucas was breaking through those walls and she didn't know how to respond. "I'm sorry," he continued, looking up at her with a mixture of guilt and frustration. "I didn't mean for this to get complicated, but the longer I spend with you, the harder it is to pretend." His eyes softened and his voice grew quieter. "I never planned on developing feelings for you." Evelyn's breath hitched. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to feel the same way. "Lucas." She started, her words faltering. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I care about you," he said, stepping closer to her, his voice filled with emotion. "More than I should. More than I was prepared for, and I know I've hurt you by asking you to do this, but I want you to know that it was never just a game for me. I never wanted to treat you like an object." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as his words hit her harder than she expected. She had been waiting for this moment, but she hadn't anticipated the weight it would carry. She had always known that they were living in a lie, but hearing Lucas admit that he was feeling something real made her heart ache with the intensity of her own emotions. "I didn't ask for this, Lucas," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't ask for any of it. I didn't ask for you to come into my life and make me feel like this." She wiped her eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. "You have a life, a world that's completely different from mine. I'm not supposed to be here." Lucas reached out gently, taking her hand in his. "Don't say that," he whispered. "You belong here as much as anyone. I don't care about the world you come from. Evelyn, I care about who you are." The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time since they'd met, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something real between them. But the fear she had been carrying for so long, of being abandoned, of being used, was still there, lurking just below the surface. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said softly, pulling her hand away. "I don't know if I can trust myself." Lucas nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I get it," he said quietly, "but I'm asking you to take a chance with me. I won't push you, but I need you to know that I'm here for real." Evelyn looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. The temptation to believe him was strong, but the fear of what might happen if she let go of her guard was just as overwhelming. She had spent so long protecting herself from the world that the idea of trusting anyone, especially someone like Luca, felt impossible. "I need time," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Lucas nodded, understanding. I can give you that. I'm not going anywhere. But when you're ready, I'll be here." As he turned to leave, Evelyn stood there staring after him, her mind racing. Was she ready to take that step? Could she allow herself to feel something real? Something that had the potential to change everything. The weight of the decision settled heavily on her chest. But for the first time, she felt like she might be ready to find out. The choice that changes everything. Days passed in a blur. Evelyn tried to go back to the routine that had been so familiar to her, working through her photography assignments, meeting people who still viewed her as just a girl from the streets. But something inside her had shifted. Every encounter felt distant, as if she were seeing the world through a lens no longer truly a part of it. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Lucas and the moments they shared, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the way his touch lingered like a promise he was too scared to make. She couldn't push him out of her mind no matter how hard she tried. And every time she saw him, a part of her heart ached with the knowledge that he was right. There was more to this than she had ever imagined, but there were walls, so many walls that she had built to keep herself safe. Could she really let them crumble? The text message from Lucas that evening hit her like a wave. "Can we meet? I need to see you. It's important." Evelyn's fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. She had promised herself not to let this go further, not to allow herself to be drawn into something that might tear her apart. But the truth was, she couldn't stay away from him, not when he made her feel things she had long forgotten how to feel: hope, love, and even fear. She agreed to meet him at the same cafe they had visited just days ago, the place where everything had shifted between them. As she walked into the cafe, she saw him sitting by the window, his posture stiff, his expression tense. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Evelyn's heart clenched as she walked toward him. He looked up and smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. She took a seat across from him, unsure of what this conversation would bring. "What's going on, Lucas?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, betraying none of the storm brewing inside her. "Why did you want to meet?" He sighed deeply, running his fingers through his hair. "I don't know how to say this, Evelyn," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been thinking about everything about us, and I can't ignore it anymore. This has never been just a contract for me. Not anymore. I never expected this to happen, but I'm falling for you. And I don't know what to do with that." Evelyn froze, the words hitting her like a physical blow, her breath caught in her throat. He was falling for her, a homeless girl who had somehow wormed her way into the life of a billionaire. It didn't make sense. She wasn't part of his world. She wasn't even close to being what he needed. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the table, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. "Say that you'll give us a chance," Lucas said, his voice pleading now, his eyes intense. "Say that you'll trust me. I know I've made mistakes. I know I've messed up, but I want to fix it. I want to fix us." Evelyn shook her head, feeling the panic rising in her chest. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "I can't do this. I can't just let myself believe that this is real. I'm not the kind of girl you need. I'm not even the kind of girl who deserves this. You are everything I need." Lucas interrupted, his voice raw with emotion. "I don't care about your past. I care about who you are now. I care about the person I've come to know, the woman who's shown me more about strength and grace than I've ever seen. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." The words hung between them, charged with an intensity that left Evelyn reeling. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself fall into the dream he was offering, but the fear was suffocating her. What if it was all a lie? What if, when the dust settled, he would walk away just like everyone else in her life had? "I don't know if I can do this," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can open myself up to you. I don't know if I can trust you with my heart." Lucas reached across the table, his hand brushing hers gently. "You don't have to trust me right now, but I'm asking you to take a chance on us. Please, just take a chance." The tears she had been holding back finally broke free, spilling down her cheeks. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want to show weakness, but she couldn't stop it. She was scared of falling in love with him, scared of the possibility that he might leave her when it was all over. Lucas stood up and moved around the table, sitting next to her. He gently wiped the tears from her face, his touch tender. "I'll be here, Evelyn, every step of the way. I know this is terrifying, but I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes. Just don't shut me out." Evelyn looked up at him, her heart racing. The man sitting beside her wasn't the billionaire who had hired her to pretend to be his fiancé. He wasn't the cold, distant person she had met in the beginning. This was a man who was offering her his heart, and for the first time in a long time, she was tempted to take it. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. "Then take all the time you need," Lucas said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I'm not going anywhere." But I'll be here waiting whenever you're ready." Evelyn nodded, her heart still heavy with doubt, but a small spark of hope ignited deep within her. And maybe she could trust him. Maybe she could let herself believe in something real. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt like she had a choice, and it terrified her. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was the kind of fear that was worth facing. Evelyn stood by the window, gazing out at the darkened sky, her heart heavy with thoughts she couldn't shake off. The world outside seemed so distant, so far removed from the comfort of this mansion she had come to call home. The streets, the cold nights, the feeling of desperation she had once known, everything seemed like a different life, but even now, despite everything Lucas had done to make her feel welcome, she still felt like a stranger in his world. She hadn't fully allowed herself to trust him, not yet. It wasn't because he hadn't shown her kindness or love. He had done everything to make her feel safe, loved and wanted, but there was still a wall inside her heart that refused to come down, a lingering feeling that this was all too good to be true. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't deserve it. Why do I feel like this? Evelyn wondered, her fingers gripping the edge of the windowsill, as if the physical act of holding on could ease the turmoil inside. Her past, the days of hardship, of hunger, of loneliness still clung to her. She couldn't forget them, no matter how much Lucas tried to make her feel like she belonged. She turned from the window, facing the reflection of herself in the mirror. Her appearance had changed. She looked different, healthier, more vibrant. But had her soul changed? She didn't know. Her past still haunted her, and it was like she couldn't shake off the girl who had once slept on the cold streets, who had nothing but the clothes on her back and the hope for a better tomorrow. How could she trust that the love Lucas offered was real when she wasn't sure if she even believed in herself? She sank into the bed, staring at the empty space around her. All this mansion, this life, Lucas, it all felt so surreal. She still couldn't believe she was here, and yet she couldn't ignore the lingering doubts. Could this really be her life now? Or was she still stuck in that world of survival, of pretending to be someone she wasn't, just to fit in? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was Lucas. She hesitated before tapping the decline button. It wasn't that she didn't want to talk to him, but right now she needed space. She needed to breathe, to think, to figure out what she really wanted. The moments ticked by slowly. Evelyn remained there, caught between her past and her present, unsure of where to go next. She closed her eyes, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her head. The air in the room felt thick with uncertainty, and she couldn't help but feel trapped, like she was living someone else's life. Lucas stood outside Evelyn's door, feeling an unfamiliar heaviness in his chest. He knew she was in there, but he also knew she needed time. He had tried everything to make her feel safe, to show her how much he cared. But there was something between them that she wasn't ready to face yet. He hated seeing her like this, distant, withdrawn. But he knew he couldn't force her to open up. He had to wait, but waiting was hard. Lucas was used to being in control, to having answers and solutions. With Evelyn, it felt like he was always just one step behind, unsure of how to reach her, unsure if she even wanted to be reached. He thought about her all the time. He thought about her laugh, the way her eyes lit up when she smiled, and how her presence seemed to fill up the space around him. But he also thought about her pain. The pain she carried from her past, the trust she hadn't given him yet, and that scared him because he didn't know how to fix it. He didn't know how to erase the shadows of her past. Lucas took a deep breath, glancing at the door. He knew she was in there, but for now, he had to let her be. He just hoped that when the time came, she would be ready to let him in. Just as Evelyn sat back down on the bed, lost in her thoughts, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and certainly not at this hour. Slowly, she got up and walked to the door, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Standing in front of her was a familiar face. A face from her past. Evelyn, the woman asked, her voice uncertain but familiar. "It's really you, isn't it?" It took Evelyn a moment to register the woman's face. Emily. A friend, or perhaps a former friend, back when Evelyn was still on the streets. She hadn't seen Emily in years, and now here she was standing at the door. Evelyn swallowed hard, her heart racing. The last person she expected to see today was someone from her past. And yet here Emily was just as sharp as ever, staring at her as if she knew something Evelyn didn't. "Emily," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn asked, her thoughts still a blur. She wasn't prepared for this kind of confrontation. "Not now, I came to see how you were doing," Emily replied. Her gaze was calculating, sharp, and Evelyn couldn't help but feel uncomfortable under her stare. I'm doing fine," Evelyn said, though her voice lacked conviction. She stepped back, allowing Emily into the room, unsure of what this visit would bring. "You sure about that?" Emily asked, her eyes narrowing. "I see you're living pretty well now, huh? Lucas really came through for you." Evelyn stiffened. She hadn't expected Emily to bring him up so quickly, and yet it seemed like Emily had already seen right through the life Evelyn was trying to build. "Yeah, he did," Evelyn replied, her voice faltering. "Lucas really came through for you." Emily asked, her eyes narrowing. "I see you're living pretty well now, huh? Lucas really came through for you." Evelyn stiffened. She hadn't expected Emily to bring him up so quickly, and yet it seemed like Emily had already seen right through the life Evelyn was trying to build. "Yeah, he did." But why are you really here? Emily took a step closer, her eyes still assessing Evelyn. I know Lucas, she said with a hint of disdain, and I know people like him. And let me tell you, Evelyn, you might think this life is perfect, but be careful. People like him don't just give things away for nothing. There's always a price. Evelyn felt the words like a slap in the face. She knew Emily was right in some ways. She had always felt like something was off, like she didn't belong in this world. But hearing it from Emily, hearing her voice drip with skepticism and judgment, it hurt more than she expected. I'm not asking for your opinion, Emily, Evelyn said, trying to keep her voice steady though she could feel the sting in her chest. I'm just trying to make the best of things. Emily didn't back down. Just remember, Evelyn, you don't know everything about him, and when the truth comes out, it might be too late. The tension between the two women hung thick in the air, and Evelyn could feel the weight of Emily's words pressing down on her. Her mind raced with doubts and insecurities, and she couldn't help but wonder if Emily was right. Was she just another pawn in Lucas's game, or was this the real thing? For now, Evelyn had no answers, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about her and Lucas anymore. It was about the lies, the secrets, and the fear that threatened to tear them apart before they even had a chance to begin. The unspoken truths, the mansion which had once felt like a dream come true for Evelyn, now seemed like a gilded cage, despite the comfort it provided. The warmth of the grand house couldn't mask the emotional distance she had built around herself. It wasn't the life she had imagined, and sometimes it felt like she was living in a world that wasn't truly hers. The glitz, the luxury, the constant smiling faces, it was all overwhelming. As she sat by the window, again looking out at the expansive garden, Evelyn couldn't help but feel torn. She had come so far from where she started, but the past still had a firm hold on her. Every moment of peace in her life now seemed fragile, and the cracks in the perfect facade were growing more visible with each passing day. She was no longer the girl who had nothing, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to embrace the woman she had become in this new world. Lucas paced around the hallway, his mind consumed by the conversation he had with his mother just a few days ago. She had asked him about Evelyn, but her tone wasn't filled with the curiosity of a mother wanting to know her son's heart. It was filled with skepticism, with a silent accusation that Lucas had somehow been blinded by a girl who didn't belong in his world. The words his mother had spoken still echoed in his ears. She doesn't belong in this world, Lucas. She's just another girl who wants something from you. Don't let her fool you. His mother's distrust ran deep, and for the first time Lucas found himself questioning what he had been doing. He had tried to protect Evelyn from the harsh realities of his life, but could she handle it? Was he leading her down a path of heartbreak? Lucas didn't want to admit it, but his own doubts were starting to creep in. He had tried to ignore them, thinking that his love for Evelyn was enough to protect them from the storm that was bound to come. But what if it wasn't enough? What if his life, the life he had worked so hard to build, wasn't the one Evelyn needed? It was in the quiet of the night that the storm finally arrived. Lucas had been at a meeting when he received the call. His heart sank as he looked at the name on the screen. His lawyer. The brief message that followed sent a chill down his spine. We need to talk. It's about Evelyn rushing out of the meeting. Lucas could barely think straight. His mind raced with the possible scenarios. Had something happened to her? Was she in trouble? The thought of anything happening to Evelyn made his stomach turn. He was determined to get to the bottom of it. But what awaited him was far more complicated than he had expected. The next morning, Evelyn awoke with a strange sense of dread hanging over her. The previous night, her thoughts had been consumed by the argument with Emily, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She had always known that life in the mansion, life with Lucas, would eventually catch up with her. The secret of her past, the lie she had told herself about starting fresh, it was all crumbling around her. As she walked downstairs, she found Lucas sitting at the breakfast table. His usual calm demeanor replaced by an unsettling intensity. He didn't look at her when she entered, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him. The moment she stepped into the room, the air seemed to grow heavy with unspoken words. I need to tell you something, Evelyn said, her voice steady, but the uncertainty was clear. She had never felt more vulnerable. Lucas looked up from the papers, his brow furrowing slightly. What's wrong? I've been thinking about everything about us, and I realized that I've been running from my past for too long. She paused, trying to gather the courage to continue. I'm not sure I belong in this world. Lucas, I feel like a fraud every time I walk through that door. I'm not the person you think I am. Lucas stood up quickly, his chair scraping against the floor. What are you talking about? Evelyn took a deep breath, her words spilling out before she could stop them. I'm not who I said I was. I'm not some girl who's been living in the streets. I was trying to escape a life I thought I couldn't have one where I wasn't constantly running away from people and things. I was hiding from the truth. And now it's catching up with me. Lucas's face remained expressionless, but Evelyn could see the hurt in his eyes. He had known there were things she wasn't telling him, but this felt like a betrayal. I don't understand, he whispered. You've been so open with me, Evelyn. I don't want you to hide anything. You don't have to do this alone. Evelyn shook her head, tears filling her eyes. But I am alone. Lucas, I always have been. And no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to escape it. The words hung in the air, and Lucas reached out to her, his voice soft. Evelyn, please don't do this to yourself. You're not alone anymore. You have me. But as Evelyn looked into his eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how much she wanted to believe him, there was something she couldn't bring herself to share. Her past, her secrets. They were still chains around her heart, and she didn't know how to break free. Over the next few days, Evelyn and Lucas drifted further apart. Despite his attempts to reassure her, Evelyn found herself withdrawing into herself even more. She couldn't bring herself to face him fully, couldn't trust that everything he was saying was true. There were still pieces of her past that she couldn't share, things she couldn't bring herself to confess. Meanwhile, Lucas's world was unraveling. His mother's concerns about Evelyn had planted a seed of doubt in his mind, and now the legal troubles surrounding the company were growing. He found himself torn between the woman he loved and the responsibility he had towards his business. The pressure was building, and he wasn't sure if he could handle both. The tension between them grew, and for the first time, Lucas wasn't sure where their relationship was headed. But one thing was certain. He wasn't willing to give up on Evelyn just yet. There was something about her, something deep inside that made him believe in the impossible. As the days passed, Lucas tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts were always with Evelyn. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were both running out of time and that the cracks in their relationship were widening with every passing day. One evening, Lucas made a decision. He couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't sit by and watch as the woman he loved pulled away from him. It was time to confront everything, the past, the doubts, and the fear that had been holding them both back. He knew the stakes. He knew the risks, but for the first time in a long while, Lucas was ready to face the truth no matter how painful it might be. And so with determination in his heart, Lucas set out to find Evelyn, to finally face the unspoken truths that had been looming over them both. As Evelyn sat by the window watching the world outside, she didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be hard, and there would be moments when the past tried to pull her back. But maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to build a life that was hers, one where the shadows of her past no longer had the power to define her. And with Lucas by her side, perhaps she could finally learn to believe in love and trust, and in the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. The future we built together. Days turned into weeks, and the decision that both Evelyn and Lucas had dreaded was finally upon them. The night before their final confrontation, Evelyn sat alone in the quiet of her apartment, reflecting on everything that had led her here, how she had gone from a homeless girl on the streets to living in the lap of luxury surrounded by wealth and status. She had come so far, but was this truly the life she had always wanted? The dazzling world of high society had opened up to her, but at what cost? Evelyn had become the fake fiancée to Lucas, a role she had initially agreed to only for the money, for the escape from the life she once knew. But now she was trapped in a web of feelings she hadn't anticipated. Love. Real love. When Lucas had kissed her for the first time, she had felt something shift deep inside her, something she couldn't ignore. But just as quickly, the doubts had returned. Was it real? Or was she just another pawn in his game to fulfill his mother's expectations? But Evelyn was no longer that frightened girl who had to scrape for every penny. She had grown, she had learned the truth about herself, and now she had to decide if she could trust her heart enough to take the next step with Lucas. Was he just as genuine as she had come to feel, or was he only doing this because of the weight of his family's pressure? The clock ticked on the night, closing in on the decisive moment. Tomorrow she would see Lucas again, and the next chapter of her life would begin. The next day, Evelyn met Lucas at the place they had agreed on, a quaint cafe in the heart of the city. The soft hum of the busy street outside contrasted with the quiet tension between them as they sat across from each other. Lucas had never looked more serious. His usual charming smile was absent, replaced with a quiet determination. He was nervous too, though he hid it well. He had everything he needed in terms of wealth, power, and family approval, but what he didn't have, what he feared he could never have, was Evelyn's trust. Evelyn, on the other hand, felt like she was sitting at the crossroads of her life. The next words they would speak would determine the direction of everything she had fought for. She had already seen the darkness and the light of this world, and now she was ready to choose the path she would walk. Evelyn. Lucas began, his voice soft but firm. I know we've been through a lot, and I know I've made mistakes, but I want you to know that Lucas, I don't need your apologies. Evelyn interrupted, her voice steady but filled with a mix of emotion. I don't need a promise of perfection. What I need is honesty from you, from me. Because if we're going to have a future together, we need to be honest about everything. About our past, our feelings, our intentions. Lucas exhaled, sharply, nodding slowly. He understood. This wasn't about money, it wasn't about appearances, it was about something real, and he wasn't about to let her slip through his fingers. I don't know how to do this, Evelyn. I don't know how to be the man you deserve, but I know that I want to try. I've tried to live up to what everyone expects from me, but I never stopped thinking about you, even when I didn't want to. I know this is all messed up, but I don't want to lose you. He said, his voice thick with emotion. Evelyn's heart softened, but her eyes held a steady, searching look. Do you really want to try, or are you just doing this because you think you should? She asked, a slight edge to her voice. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Lucas said, leaning forward, his hands resting on the table. What we have, what we could have is real, and I want to build it with you. I'm not asking you to pretend anymore, Evelyn. I'm asking you to be with me for real. The silence between them was deafening. Evelyn searched his face, looking for any hint of insincerity, but found none. What she saw in his eyes was vulnerability, something she hadn't seen before. It was the kind of vulnerability that she herself had fought so hard to bury. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in, and taking a deep breath, she spoke again. I'm not going to pretend either. Lucas, I'm not going to pretend that everything is perfect, but I'm willing to try, with you, for the first time in what felt like forever. Lucas smiled, a real smile, not the kind he had used for appearances, but one that came from deep within. I can't promise you that it will be easy, he said, his voice low, but I can promise you that I will always be here for you no matter what. And just like that, Evelyn made her choice. She had fought for a new life, a better future, and now she had to embrace the possibilities that came with it. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but it would also be filled with hope. As they left the cafe, hand in hand, Evelyn felt the weight of the past lift off her shoulders. No longer just the homeless girl or the fake fiancée she was. Evelyn strong, capable, and ready for whatever came next. Together, she and Lucas would forge a path of their own, one that was based on trust, honesty, and love. A love that was real, and a future they would build side by side.